ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world. This is a really crazy time in America, in the world, and especially in our politics and media. And sometimes you might feel like you need to be John Wick to navigate the bullets and the explosions and the threats that are flying all around you. And so we brought back a returning champion, the John Wick of our guest network. The great and powerful Michael Steele is back on Independent Americans. Welcome back, sir.
Dude, I love it. Good to be back in the neighborhood. I figured I'd just bring that John Wick vibe to the game because we're gonna need that because we're dodging a whole lot of stuff out there. So,
right,
yeah. You need it, brother.
I want to get into all of it, and I'm anxious to get your thoughts on the politics and the media and the future. Mm-hmm. But we talk about John Wick for folks who may not remember. You were on in October of last year. And you explained how your background is the Continental Switchboard from the John Wick movie.
That's it.
I don't think the new John Wick had come out yet at that time.
The new one had 4 had not come out yet, right?
So
yeah.
What do you think?
For those of you who just started with this, this is the perfect way to end it, right? It is such an incredible franchise. It is a great story, and at the end of the day, it's a love story about a man and his dog, and that's when you stop and you peel it back. That's what this whole thing is about. They killed the man's dog, and all hell was unleashed.
Well, maybe George Santos should have watched that, right?
Yeah.
Given how he screwed over a vet and his dog. And spoiler alert, I haven't seen number 4 yet. I've been saving it because I want to see it in the theater. And I have 2 little kids, so I don't get to go to a theater. I go to war zones more often than I go to theaters. So it's on the list. But I think it's an incredible franchise. I think it's the I don't know how to say this, but the violence is beautiful. And the action is artistry on a level that is really stunning.
Yeah, dude, you really put your finger on it. It is. I mean, you sit there and you think about the choreography and the level of elevation of that, the scene of, taking out the bad guys. And it is done with a level of sophistication that we just haven't seen in a lot of movies. And Keanu Reeves it's an incredible actor to begin with, but he just brings that, the way he handles the weapon, the way in one hand, you can see there's respect for it. On the other hand, he absolutely knows how to get the maximum effect from it. And it's symmetry. It's beautiful, man. I love it.
Look, like the political parallels on everything from the need for the dynamism of a John Wick to, I don't know, maybe Zelensky has been like a political John Wick. Yeah. And then, frankly, on the dark side, the violence that we're seeing in America that sometimes feels like a John Wick movie, right? I mean, it feels like you're in a first-person shooter. I want to talk about all of that, but let me ask you, because you're not actually at the Continental Switchboard. No. Where are you and how are you?
I'm here in my home office here in Maryland and doing well. I battle back against the crazy every day. You have new levels of stupid that reveal itself. And a lot of that stupid you can anticipate. And then some of the rest of it is just shocking. When you hear people react to, obvious points of fact, like in the Eugene Carroll case, with Donald Trump, to hear Republicans on the back end talk about, oh, well, yeah, the legal system in New York just sucks, like, really? That's your response because the guy you have whose head, you have your head up his ass with, you just can't fathom that, a jury of his peers could look at the evidence and say, yeah, you committed sexual assault. You're more offended by the fact that they convicted them than the act itself. And that, to me, is one aspect of this that still amazes in some respects, that there seemingly no level, PJ, where at least Republican leaders can man up and just say, you know what, this ain't right. and we can't do this. We can't do this anymore. I mean, even in the worst movies ever made, there's a point where the main characters realize this really sucks.
Yes, and there are some movies that are just all about destruction.
Yeah.
And there's no plot, there's no acting. It's just we're going to blow up as much shit as possible.
Sure,
and
right?
The part of what the leaders in this party are doing, I think, is strategic. It's not accidental. Like, being devoid of a moral center and attacking institutions that oppose you is a strategy, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the judicial system or now the Pentagon, right? Like, nothing is sacred, but it is a strategy. And I think in some levels, it continues to be an effective strategy because it taps into this populism, this fuck the man like kind of attitude that does exist in this country, that Trump tapped into very, very deeply and continues to tap into. And it's nasty and it's terrible. Let me ask you this, Michael. It feels like things are worse than they've ever been in recent times.
Yes.
Right. It feels
Agreed.
like they are.
And that's because they are.
And that's my question. Are they?
Yes. And I'm just letting you and your listeners know there's more to come. I said in 2018, going into that cycle and certainly heading into the 2020 cycle, that there's more of this to come. We're not through this yet. There is an epidemic of vile, putrid human behavior that has overwhelmed our political system. You know, there was a time where our culture and our faith, our community experiences informed our politics. It was from that how we built, policy on some big and gnarly issues. It is how, at a time when Republicans and Democrats were at loggerheads during the Clinton years, they could still manage to balance the nation's budget, handle the nation's business. It is how during the Reagan and Tip O'Neill years, they could, deal with global and domestic affairs in a way in which the people were at the center of the solution. That informed politics is now broken. And what we see is that the corruption within our political system has infected our culture, our faith, and our community experiences with each other, where we now look at each other as suspects. Yep. I don't like PJ because he's of a different political party or different political view or different political attitude. Even though we're sitting in the same church on Sunday, our kids go to the same schools, we live in the same neighborhoods. And then you begin to disaggregate the various components of the relationship that made it work. And so when you do that, when I see you less than, when I see you and your concerns and interests of no value, this is where we find ourselves. And what makes it worse, and one of the big differentiators, is the fact that in the past, our political leadership would be the glue that would kind of pull it all back and hold it together, remind us of the value of the proposition of America, right? Remind us of the value of the proposition of a free and open society, a free press, voting rights, et cetera. Today, our leaders are the ones who are breaking apart those relationships.
Michael, if we're looking at this, like I like to look at it in global, almost global combat scenarios, right? And if the GOP or the Trumpists, as I would call them, or the MAGAists are Putin and Russia, the Democrats are not Ukraine. The Democrats are more like Moldova, right? They're more like Moldova, right? Like we're wishing for them to be Ukraine, and we hope that they will be Ukraine, but they are corrupt, they are inept, they are ineffective. And I wonder if part of what's missing, especially in the media conversation, the cable news media conversation, is the other alternatives that people are looking for. And you and I have had this conversation, and I want to talk about third parties. I want to talk about independence, and I want to talk about that. But on a very basic level, like you're a Republican on MSNBC.
Right.
Democrats love you because you're on MSNBC because they consider you an ally or a friend or at least a reasonable person.
Right.
But cable news is also falling apart, right? Like the
Yeah.
audiences are
Absolutely.
coming undone. And I think in some ways that's good for America because I would argue cable news has perpetuated a lot of these divisions. But I go back to the fact that this is also a strategy. Putin wants to see us divided. Our internal enemies and extremists want to see us divided. There are interests that want this to happen. It's not because of some defect or because, they're just not good enough. Like
Right.
it is actually a strategy to destroy and weaken America. So I want to ask you, when you sit, how do you sit at MSNBC and see this, right? Because it is so polarized and you are a bridge builder. You're a great communicator. You're a voice of reason. What's it like to sit there? Because we all want something better. And frankly, we all want something better from MSNBC and from our news networks. And we all want something better from our parties. So you're kind of in this rare air where you're a reasonable person, but like so many others, you kind of take what's out there as a way to communicate and get things done. So I know that's a meandering question.
No,
but frankly,
I know.
What's it like to be at MSNBC right now when MSNBC is going further left and getting more narrow? The Democratic Party, you could argue, is going further left at times and maybe getting more narrow. And we've talked about how independents are now 49% of the country and rising. Right. Talk about what it's like to be you there.
Well, the thing that anchors me is just a long time appreciation, evolutionary appreciation of the fact that when I look at America as a whole, what I see is a center-right nation. I see a nation that in the main, no matter how you cut it, no matter what part of the country you're in, the most liberal parts of the West Coast or the most conservative parts of the South, at the end of the day, you're going to find a strain of belief that, I want to be able to raise my kids the way I want to raise my kids. I want to be able to go out into the job market, find a job and work and provide for my family. I want to be able to run my business and grow my business and begin to develop the American dream. So these aspirational aspects of America are still constant strains that exist. So looking at it through that frame, I have friends who will say, well, America's center left. And I say, okay, I'll buy the center part. Well, you'll need to convince me of the left because, you've got to, because every time there is a push and pull in that direction, there is an equal and opposite reaction to it, right? And so, folks, and here's a little bit of an interesting kick. A lot of folks think that, for example, the gay marriage issue is a liberal issue. In fact, it isn't. It is actually a conservative issue because it's about the individual freedoms to choose whom they love, right? It has very strong libertarian undertones to it, and that the state has no role in objecting to that relationship, just as they wouldn't object to a Black man and a white woman getting married 50 years ago. And so the reality of it is the country, from my perspective, as I sit there on set, I try to reflect some of that back in conversations. I try to reflect back what I pick up in my listening to the American people when I travel, the emails and text messages they send me. And I do. I mean, I have people send me letters to my office and saying, hey, saw you on air saying this. This is what I think about that. And so all for me is kind of a learning experience. And this, I think, at the end is where the networks and particularly these so-called independent structures in media get into trouble when they stop listening and learning, when they become much more reflective of one view or another. It is the problem with Fox. It is the problem at MSNBC at times, and is the problem at CNN. CNN now is trying to remake itself into some conservative bastion by putting these MAGA Republicans on its air, thinking that's what the country is going to buy. Well, they're not going to buy that because you're not listening to what the country is saying. You're listening to one portion of it and thinking that's everybody, and it's not. So it's at times challenging because we've gotten away from, that's why I love coming on your podcast and podcasts like this, because we can actually talk about the meat of things. We can actually talk about the substance of things, as opposed to just dealing in the reactionary world of Donald Trump farted today. What do you think of that?
Right.
And that's not news.
Right.
It just isn't, I'm sorry. Yeah. Some may think it is, but it ain't.
So, Michael, this meat, okay? This is kind of what I'm really interested in probing on this show, and with you especially. Like, America's not eating its meat. No. We're getting a lot of candy. We're getting a lot of drugs. We're getting a lot of crack, right? And that middle, whether it's center, left, or right, is underserved, right? We're underserved in our politics. We're underserved in our media. We're underserved in our policy. And I want to ask you, where does this shake out, right? Because Trump is now guilty in a civil suit. He could be indicted more times. I think he could be in jail and still get the Republican nomination. We'll see. Yeah. But we are careening toward another Trump-Biden matchup. Right. Folks are dissatisfied with that, and I want to talk about your thoughts on the options, but just the prospect of that and the damage it's going to create at a time when the country is so divided and those media networks are struggling for ad revenue, and a fight is in their interest. Right. And the political industrial complex is going to ramp itself up and feed into this epic clash between these two old guys that reminds me of that old Genesis video of like Land of Confusion when Reagan and Gorbachev are like beating each other up in this mud pit. Right. But I think there's a more serious question about, like, I think the Democrats are more out of touch than they ever understand. And I think you probably feel that way. I hear Biden's new presidential message leading with the economy. What fucking country do they live in? Like, coffee, milk, everything is expensive, right? People are getting laid off everywhere. Nobody can pay their bills. Credit card are out of control. And they want to lead with the economy and say, look at how great it is. It just cuts to the core for me about how out of touch the Democrats are. And now they've got their culture wars, right? They're going to talk about trans bans. They're going to talk about gay rights. They're going to talk about guns, which is a reasonable issue to talk about, but it comes off as a culture war, in my view. So we're at this epic clash again that's already pretty much set, unless one of them gets sick or dies, which could happen, and I think is still something to consider, because that would be the ultimate disruption to either or both parties in this entire landscape. But this die is cast now, right? It's the two of them. Yeah. Unless last time we talked about DeSantis, I mean, it's folding for him, right? And Trump is getting stronger, as we've seen before. Right. And when I go out in the streets and talk to people who don't watch MSNBC, Trump's still got a lot of support, and maybe even more so. There's a lot of hatred for the Democratic brand, and there's hatred for Joe Biden, whether it's deserved or not. That's a carryover for the hatred from Nancy Pelosi and the hatred from Hillary Clinton and the hatred from Bill. It just compounds into that voting populace. So I guess what I'm saying is we're going to get another shitty set of options, right?
Yeah, so okay. So you've put a lot there, and I'm going to try to unpack it, but I'll start by unpacking it this way. What are you bitching about?
I'm bitching about the fact that our political system is failing our democracy.
Yeah,
while our democracy is under attack.
But who controls that outcome? Who ultimately controls that outcome? Because the founders made it very clear who controls that outcome.
Okay.
We do.
Yes. And you and I are here. You and I are here right now.
No, so I'm just saying, but we the people, the 330
I get that. I get the analysis. And this is a conversation I've had with.
But let me finish the point.
Can I ask the question though? Here's the question I want to ask you, right? You're a strategist. You have a great feel. You have a great gut. You understand John Wick and you understand the debt ceiling, right? You know, uptown, downtown, everywhere in between. Right. You understand the problem very well. And I think a lot of people understand the problem very well. I've had, Andrew Yang has been on here to talk about how the forward party is the solution. What do you see as a solution? What are the solutions to this problem that is failing our country?
Sorry? We grow up.
What does that look like? What does that look like?
We grow up and stop being so pissed at everything.
Yeah, but that's nice.
But wait a minute. No. You got to stop. But you can't get to a solution when you're angry. You can't get to a solution. Okay. It's like a couple, and the wife and the husband, or the husband and the husband and the wife and the wife. I don't care what the makeup of the family is, right? If they have a fight and they don't deal with what's making them angry in the first instance, they're not going to solve that problem. Yeah. You're just not. So I wanted to, you just laid this laundry list of stuff that was, that people are angry about. Using jobs, for example, the country just created 320,000 jobs.
People don't feel that, but they all, how many layoffs happen?
Wait a minute,
how many
but
layoffs
that's my point. But that's
time?
my point. Yeah. People don't feel that. Well, what am I supposed to feel if I'm going to work and you're not going to work? Why am I pissed if I have a job and you don't?
Look, here's what I'm saying, Michael, is that I don't think that is a winning strategy for Joe Biden. And I don't think that shows a Democratic Party that's in touch.
It won for him in 2022.
Okay, and if he thinks maybe it'll win for him again, I don't think I would. If I were Joe Biden, I would not lead with the economy and COVID, which is what he's leading with, which is not, in my view, going to attract a lot of independent Americans. I don't think it's going to be convincing. And what I'm asking you, Michael, is I get what you're saying, and we're in heated agreement on a lot of this. Like, I would like people to be less angry. I would like eating cupcakes to make you skinny.
But you can't. But you can't.
What are the strategic things? Like, what are you? You're investing your time.
I can't get to the strategy because there are too many roadblocks.
But then that's giving up. Then that's giving up.
No, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. That's why I take on the party leadership, because that's the roadblock. You are angry because someone keeps telling you should be pissed.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I am angry because I have a right to be angry. And because I feel angry, right? It's like saying, to use your point, right? The couple's fighting, right? And they're angry. And you're saying, stop being angry. But their house is in foreclosure. Their kids are getting shot in schools. They're worried about national security.
PJ, that is not happening for the mainstream of America. That's just not the case.
You think most of America is good? Good.
I'm not saying that all of America is good, but you're creating this. You're saying that the country is in this hellscape, and that's just not objectively true. It just isn't. Now, narratively, you can feel a certain way. You can look at something and think something about it, but the objective reality is unemployment is the lowest it's been since 1969. That means there are more Americans working today than ever before.
But is that an accurate metric anymore? Is that an accurate metric anymore of the health of our economy?
Why does it stop becoming a good metric?
Is that more important than prices? Is that more important than prices?
Prices are coming down. Gas is not $7 a gallon anymore. Gas across the street from my house a year ago was almost $6. You know what it is today?
And what's milk cost? What's coffee cost? What's rent cost? What's taxes? What are your taxes look like?
My taxes haven't gone up in my neighborhood, in my community.
Because you're in a nice neighborhood.
No. All the more reason to raise taxes, right? But
no one will.
But no one's raised. No one in the state of Maryland has raised taxes yet. There's been no tax increases. I mean, where have we seen taxes go up on families across the country? I haven't seen.
I think taxes is a great example. I think it's cumulative. Like, I'm a New Yorker. I live in New York. I pay taxes in New York. I have a business in New York. You want to feel taxes in New York and California and see why people move to Texas and Florida? Start a business.
But wait a minute.
Payroll taxes, state taxes, city taxes, insurance taxes.
Did they increase those taxes last year?
Whether they increased or not, they're cumulative. They're just high. They're just high.
That's my point.
They're just high.
Wait a minute, hold up, bro. If the rate now is the same as it was 4 years ago, what are you complaining about?
Because lending rates are higher. Costs more to have a credit card. Mortgage rates are higher.
That's true. So
everybody's running up more debt. Childcare costs are higher.
But childcare costs have always gone up. They've gone up every year. There's no difference between.
College is more expensive.
That's all. That's nothing new. New.
College expenses are definitely new.
College expenses went up during the Trump era, just as they're going up during the Bush times.
Okay, so let me walk it back. Right? Let me walk it back and ask you this. Like, what I'm getting at is, because on some levels, I feel like these are kind of talking points for the Democratic Party. Right?
No.
But like your argument is that things are good in America. That surprises me.
Arguing that things are good in America. I'm arguing that things aren't as objectively bad as you're being told they are. That's my whole point.
It depends on who you are, and it depends on who's doing the telling.
It depends on who you are. It depends on who you're listening to. It depends on how you put it all together. My whole thing is, look, objectively speaking, there was a period when interest rates went up. Interest rates are now coming down. When inflation was up,
mortgage rates just went up.
I didn't mean, I meant inflation. Not
inflation's down. The Fed rate just raised rates. Yeah.
Right. So the Fed's just raised rates, which is why the interest rates, which is why inflation is coming down. Right. That's part of the game. That's part of the narrative. I mean,
yeah. And if you're trying to buy a house right now, mortgage just got more expensive and your credit card rate went up.
That's very true. That's very true. But you know what? People are still buying houses. You know what?
Because there's a housing shortage.
Can I just say something to you?
Yeah.
For all the bitching and moaning about gas prices last year, you know what the evidence showed? Objective evidence from Pew to other research institutions. People didn't change their behaviors. People still went on vacations. They still drove their cars. They paid them. They figured out how to.
But Michael, gas prices is last year's argument. Okay, if I'm Trump, I come out and say, no, listen, I'm just talking about what's next. I didn't say gas prices.
Gas prices are still killing people.
I didn't say gas prices. I'm not saying gas prices. I'm saying there are food prices, childcare prices, housing prices. Those are the things that people are feeling right now, in my view. And what I want to come back to,
gas prices too. They're feeling this. I mean, this. Look, it can't differ.
I think they are feeling everything.
Because I still got to drive my kid to Little League.
Is the solution? Is what you're saying? The solution to this moment and this situation is Joe Biden?
No.
What's the solution?
The solution to the situation is to objectively understand what's happening. I think at the end, the American people do. I'm going to tell you why. Because the exact same conditions existed, but they were worse in 2022. And everybody in media, including my network, except for me, was screaming, oh, this big red wave was coming. And I was like, I don't think so. You know why? Because I think people ultimately are going to disaggregate the way they feel from the way they vote, right?
Okay.
And that's exactly what they did. Yes, Joe Biden's numbers going into 2022 should have been a complete and utter wipeout for Democrats. It wasn't. No one is bothered to step back and ask, well, why did that happen? Well, the voters told you why, because at the end of the things, while all the stuff you mentioned in 2022 were valid and important for those folks, from how much they paid for childcare to the cost of buying a new home, there were other things that they factored in as well that made a difference in their ultimate decision on who they were going to support. Yes. And so that's what I'm looking at. I'm not discounting the economic argument. I don't have an issue with Biden leading with the economic argument as long as he knows how to make the case. And I would argue Democrats effectively don't know how to message shit. So that may not be a good idea.
We agree wholeheartedly on that one.
All right. Yeah. So, and again, I'm not sitting up here beating a drum for Joe Biden and Democrats. I'd love to see a strong Republican nominee come out with an anchor in the traditions of the country, with an eye on the future of what this nation is going to be. But we're not getting that from the Republican Party.
I think
we're not going to get yet. I don't know.
That takes me where I want to go, though, because I think we're getting toward the overlap area where you and I are in alignment on a lot of things. I mean,
and we're in alignment on this piece.
I know. Well, my view on the Biden-Trump thing is different. In my view, I think people decided that weak and out of touch and incompetent was less worse than crazy, dangerous, and corrupt. And I think that's where they are right now. Like, they'll look at Biden and say, yeah, they're both old, but this guy's raping women and colluding with the Russians and laundering money. And this guy's old and out of touch. So two shitty options. I'm taking the less shitty. I think that's really the calculation. And I think a lot of people, and we know a lot of people just don't vote at all and just complain and scream at their television. But I think the need for the structural reform is very urgent, I think, on things like open primaries and ranked choice voting and better candidates. And so this only happens because the GOP is disintegrated or corrupted in the way it has become. And so I asked you this back in October, and I'll ask you this again. They're trading on your name. Every day you're on TV talking about how fucked up the Republicans are, but you're still one of them. Yeah. So at what point do they lose you? And what point do you say, enough? I just won't give you my family name. I won't allow them to put Republican under Michael Steele because I'm so ashamed of what that word has been connected to.
That's a personal struggle. It's one that I've struggled with for quite some time now. But I've been a Republican since 1976. I've been here toiling in this vineyard when it was just a handful of us. It was the least popular thing you could do in politics. It was absolutely not the best solution for anyone's political future to be a Black Republican back in the day. But I figured out that what I valued was, which is why I call myself a Lincoln Republican, I valued the ideal that Lincoln ascribed to this party, that Frederick Douglass ascribed to this party, around the idea of individual rights and freedoms. That for me is the cornerstone. We can bitch and moan and groan about abortion.
That's dead, Michael. That's so dead now. That's not what this is anymore. It's gone.
Well, that's my point. That's my point. I don't think it is, for me at least at this point. I think it is still worth making the case and holding up the mirror to the party and saying, look at what you're becoming. Okay. Right? This is inconsistent with who you say or claim you are. Now, there's only so much you can, so long you can hold that mirror up because they keep hitting it and breaking it, right?
Yeah.
But then I ask myself, okay, where do I go from there?
Well, this is part of what I will challenge,
because there is no active independent space to land in with political structure that actually is going to amount to anything other than
but like with all, I have a lot of respect for you, and I think that you are a really important leader, and I feel like there's a dam, okay, like Kinzinger, you, Cheney, we could list off the names, and nobody wants to be first. Right? Nobody wants to say, I'm leaving. Just, I don't have a better place to go.
A lot of folks have left.
But I'm right. But and I've asked this of Kinzinger, I've asked this of others. At what point do you leave? Does it become a bridge too far? And it seems like a lot of folks said, if Trump gets the nomination again. So if he gets the nomination again next summer, you're still going to be a Republican.
I'll see. After says, I'm not gonna say yes or no to that today.
I just think that they're trading on your name, right? Like they look more reasonable when guys like you are still Republican.
But who's trading on my name?
The Republican Party.
No, they're not. The Republicans
they can say, look at Michael Steele.
They can't stand me. They can say
collectively, when Republicans look up, and I'm a Republican TV watcher, I look up and say, you know, Michael Steele's still there. Liz Cheney's still there. Adam Kinzinger's still. They're still fighting the good fight on the inside. So I'm going to stay.
Well, right? And so if that happens, what my admonition to thee or plea to that individual is, then stand with me and make a good noise, and stand with me and fight. Stand with me and publicly say this isn't right. I'm tired. I got tired a long time ago of having conversations with Republicans on the Hill who quietly told me how frustrated and angry they were with Donald Trump, but then wouldn't go stand in front of a bank of microphones and say that publicly.
I get it.
So you know, there is that piece. My own political journey is my journey. It is nobody else's. No one in this party was there the day I signed the dotted line to become a Republican, and no one in this party gets to decide when I leave. Right. So all this bullshit with, you know, central committees and state parties, you know, censoring and throwing Liz Cheney out and Adam Kinzinger, y'all can kiss my ass, because that shit don't mean nothing. In fact, you do that to me, then it's game on, baby. You thought you didn't like me then. Wait till what you get now. So the reality of it is, I get to be the author of me, not you, not anyone else. And so that's been my approach in politics. Yes, there is a point, and I know in my heart and my head where that point is, right? And I'll know it when I get there. Between now and that point, I continue to fight for the things that I value and believed as a Republican, the things that drew a 17-year-old kid to say, hey, all my friends are over there, but I'm going to stand here on the playground and make the case. The easy thing to do, PJ, is to give up and to leave and to throw stones at it. The hardest thing to do is to stay in and try to correct the course. I, along with others, may fail miserably, and some will say you already have failed miserably.
The hardest thing actually to do, in my view, is to leave and start something else with no net. That's actually harder than staying inside where you have a degree of respect, you have a degree of traction. Like in some levels, when I hear,
I see that. That's like when I was in the seminary. The hardest.
I think there's a generational component here. We're like, on some level, you guys are like Brooklyn Dodgers fans. Like the team left, and you're still there trying to hold that mantle. And the new generation is really what I'm looking at, right? And I'm looking at like the younger generation that doesn't remember when you were in office, that knows you from television, Kinzinger, Cheney, all of them, and they're just looking for something else. Now, it doesn't mean you have to start a third party. They're looking to you all for moral guidance, for leadership, for an example. And it takes me back to Maryland to ask you, Larry Hogan has been rumored as a presidential candidate. He said he won't run, but now No Labels is pushing their agenda again to get this unity ticket that is led by co-chairs Joe Lieberman and Larry Hogan. Right. So what do you think, as a person that is looking for better, about specifically, because I think in many ways No Labels has given independents a bad name, because what they're creating, no matter what they say, is kind of a spoiler, and especially they don't say who their candidates will be, which is bullshit in my view, right? But let's assume it is Joe Lieberman and Larry Hogan, because they're running this. They're the most likely. If Joe Lieberman or
it'll be more Joe Manchin and Larry Hogan than Joe Lieberman and Larry Hogan.
Maybe, but what if a combination of those decide to jump in, who are you going to support?
I had no idea at that point. I agree with you. I think the No Labels move is problematic on many levels for this upcoming election. The idea that you think you're just going to wait and sort of, see how it plays out with the Democrats and Republicans. Well, we know how that's going to play out.
Like say, we're going to draft a quarterback, but we're not going to tell you who it is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it is not a good day in the neighborhood when that happens. I don't see that helping anybody but Trump at this point, largely because of how the political structures are aligned on the ground across the country. And the advantage is to Republicans at that level. And so I just don't think there's enough peel off of independents and center right, center left Democrats that creates a much opportunistic lane for Trump and whoever his running mate is. Yeah. So I have a real problem with that. I think I don't like to conjecture about something until I see it begin to take shape and I understand exactly how it's structured and what it looks like. And so I have not had conversations with Larry at that level. I've had conversations with him about the open seat here for the U.S. Senate in Maryland. Had conversations with him about an initial presidential run, as I've had with some others. But I've not sort of talked about the No Label piece. So I don't have a full appreciation of what he appreciates about that. And so I'm kind of reserving judgment, but I'm reserving judgment as I stand with you on that issue.
I continue to say that there is an opportunity for independent candidates who say, I am independent. Now, it might be, I don't think at the national level, it will serve as a spoiler in this time, but there is an opportunity to run 100 independent candidates in 100 local races and maybe 10 or 15 win, right? And in a state like Maryland, if Larry Hogan had run as an independent against Wes Moore, that versus as a Republican, he might have done a whole lot better. Who knows, right? But there is an opportunity for local races, governors, Senate, congressional races, dog catcher, people who just say, hey, I'm no party at all. I am truly a free agent. And I think it's really has to be defined by leaders. So I'm hoping that people will jump in, not at the national level. I hope that we can get that structural reform in place at the local level for open primaries and to make it viable for independents, right?
I agree with you 1,000%. Yeah. I agree with you 1,000% on that. I've said for 25 years now, particularly after I went back and looked at the Ross Perot race, that you will never crack that nut by running for president. You crack that nut by running somebody for county executive, for mayor, for municipal leader, for state legislative offices. It has to be. It's organically built from the bottom up.
Yep. Because
what you're ultimately doing, PJ, is you're changing voter behavior.
Right.
And you cannot do that if you just sort of paper over current voter behavior and don't change it. They're going to revert to type. They're going to revert to patterns that they're familiar with. You need to give them someone else to look at in a different way, and do so in which they feel a connection that they're willing to risk what their mom and their daddy told them and how their mom and their daddy raised them politically. Because everyone, you've all heard it before, oh my God, if I vote for Republican, my daddy would turn over in his grave. Well, yeah, that's because daddy instilled.
We need expansion teams. There was a time when the Miami Heat and the Orlando Magic were new, right? There was a time when in my life when there were new things. And I think that people can't wrap their heads around, not being Brooklyn Dodgers fans anymore until the Brooklyn Nets exist. That wasn't on the landscape before, and now it is. So I know I got to let you go, but let me ask you for another check-in on Maryland. Last time we talked in October, Wes Moore had been elected or was about to be elected. You said wait and see. I think he's on a tear. I think he's putting up numbers. I think he's coming fast, like we talked about last time. I think he is a almost inevitable Democratic candidate for president. It's just a matter of how soon. If something like Joe Biden gets sick, then I think he's at the front of the pack among the top 5 very quickly. People are saying he could run in 2028 or maybe after that. What's your updated assessment of where Wes is right now?
Wes has gotten through his first legislative session. There were some successes there. There's still ongoing economic issues, to your broader point about the economy. And that is no different in Maryland than it is anywhere else. So we can't sit there and go that, the landscape that you describe is necessarily true here as well. So we'll see how that plays out. I think I've always felt this way because I've seen what it does. I think conversations about being president are not only premature, they're ill-advised, because it reminds me of the fact of a papal conclave. There's always the men who go in a pope and come out a cardinal. And that's Wes's problem. Everyone sees him as president, but you gotta do the job in front of you first. So my recommendation is continue to do the job in front of you. And if you do that well enough that you can then elevate that because remember, he ain't the only one who's going to be a player in the next round.
Right.
Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania is as much, if not more of a star than Wes Moore is right now in some respects.
I don't buy that. With all due respect, I don't
buy it.
I'm Democrats not Shapiro.
Democrats, I don't know. You're not, if you're a Democrat, then you can have some say in that. The Democrats I talk to, that's what I'm hearing. So
that's fun to play. It's a fun game for us to play.
It's a fun game to play. In other words, you don't know how these landscapes play out because, put it this way, Pennsylvania's a bigger piece in the political puzzle than Maryland. So being the governor of Pennsylvania has a lot more value politically than being the governor of Maryland. That's my only point. That's how they're looking at it. And so the reality of it is both of these individuals not to mention, other governors and elected officials who are out there are all going to reshape that political landscape on the Democratic side. The question becomes for Republicans is how and who reshapes that landscape on the GOP side.
Yep.
And do we allow that to happen? Are we so locked in on all things Trump that even when Trump is not there, that's still the only game that we can play? And that's going to be an interesting test.
I think it cuts to maybe the two things that I see as maybe not understood and explored enough. Number one, people are sick of Trump and Biden. They're sick of Trump and Biden, and they're starved for leadership that is new, that is pragmatic, that feels exciting, that feels next generation, whether it's Shapiro or West.
Can I ask you a question though?
Yeah.
When did they get sick of Trump and Biden?
Oh, I think most of them were sick of them before the last election.
So then why did they nominate them?
Because it's what we got. It's like, okay, this
isn't what you got. No, it wasn't what you got.
I think.
Wait a minute. No.
Like, again, hold on, let me answer your question. So with the Democratic Party, none of them, in my view, could have beaten Trump. Like, it was Biden. It's what you like. It was Biden versus Bernie or Buttigieg or Klobuchar.
You can't prejudge an election before it happens. What do you mean none of them could have beaten Trump? You can't prejudge the outcome.
Okay.
I think. Look, wait a minute. Can I ask you a question?
You can ask me any question you want.
Was Mage the favorite in the Kentucky Derby? Because no one thought Mage could win the Kentucky Derby, but they ran the race.
This is not the Kentucky Derby. The Kentucky Derby is so much more fair and unpredictable than American politics. Like, here's what I'm telling you: Biden and Trump are the brand right now, right? And I think the disruption, there's a hunger for new leadership. There's a hunger for a next generation of leadership, whether it's AOC or it's DeSantis or it's Wes Moore. I think this is true. And I will tell you this, and here's the disruption nobody's planning for. Any day we could wake up and one of them could be dead. They're both old. Neither one of them are in great health.
Stop it with the ageism.
No, it's not. It's a reality.
Dude,
it's a reality.
We could not be here tomorrow morning.
Every day in Ukraine. Hold on. Every day in Ukraine, they wake up and say, Zelensky could die. What are we going to do? That's proper leadership planning to assume what you do if the current leader is out. And I don't think that people are being responsible enough, frankly, in their self-exploration about what they would do if they're gone. They're so used to the two of them being there. And what's really going to happen, and the real opportunity for independents, for new candidates, is when the two of them are off the board. That could happen very quickly. It could happen in the next year and a half. And then we're going to see real political chaos. And then maybe you'll be in charge of the Republican Party.
No, that won't happen again. But the reality is,
it ain't happening.
I don't accept your underlying thesis, because I put the onus where I believe the onus was placed over almost 200 and plus years ago, when the founders gave us the power, and we have been irresponsible in that. We have set up a political system which we then disengage from and then bitch about the outcome. I'm like, well, okay, how many of you actually voted in the Republican primary? How many of you actually voted in the Democratic primary? Go back and look at the percentages. About 30% of the total.
I'm not allowed to vote in the primaries. I'm an independent.
Well, you're not, but I'm just saying.
So are tens of millions of other Americans.
In these primaries, 60 to 7% of eligible voters didn't vote. So then they bitch about the result. Who won the primary? Well, if you didn't want Donald Trump or Joe Biden, get your lazy ass up and go to the polls and vote. Don't sit back and bitch later on about the outcome when you didn't participate in the game.
Michael, like, the only thing more American than action movies is bitching about stuff. So, like, Americans are always going to bitch about politics. They're always going to bitch about the. It's kind of that's part of what we feel empowered to do.
But participate. I'm sorry, bitching does not excuse.
I'm here participating with you. I think anyone listening is participating with you. And this is why I think these conversations are important. You're talking to a lot of people that you're right. You're right about all that. None of them are watching watching MSNBC. They're watching ESPN, or they're watching nothing to do with. You're right. You are absolutely right in what you're saying, but those people aren't watching what you're talking about. They're not watching this show right now.
It doesn't matter what they watch. It's what they know. They grew up in this country. They've seen elections. They're just land from Mars and like, oh my God, what is this political process?
Here's what I'll tell you.
Let me just
watch
sports.
If you run for something or you're in charge of the Republican Party, a lot more of them will be involved. A lot more of them will have trust and faith in the system.
That's why I love you, PJ. I appreciate you, brother. I really do.
And I want to let you go. I thank you for all of your time and your tenacity and straight up, like you're speaking truth. And you're doing it, I don't want to say behind enemy lines, but definitely behind like occupied territory. I mean, MSNBC is a fucking shit show. And I say that as a guy who's on it all the time. You know, I mean, it's madness, but I'm glad you're hosting. Can I say that? I'm glad you're hosting more often. I think that gives me some hope. I mean, it's one of the few things I'll watch over there is if you're hosting. And I am rooting for you, and I'm rooting for anybody that is reasonable and has a pure intent. And I also am rooting for you to declare your independence and leave the Republican Party.
Well, I'm closer to that than you may realize, my friend, number one. And number two, I appreciate you. I have grown very fond of you, watching you, listening to you. Appreciate it when you're on the air. It's fresh, it's honest, and I think your listeners to your podcast and those who see you on my network and other networks really begin to get an appreciation that there are some good people out here in this country who are just trying to help us get it right. And you're one of those good people who are doing that every day. So I love the conversation. I don't want folks to get it twisted. That back and forth between PJ and myself just now, that was all good. That was good love. That was hashing it out. That's what we should be doing as a country, is hashing it out instead of looking for ways to kill each other metaphorically and otherwise. And so I just think what you're doing is much appreciated by me and a whole lot of people out there.
Well, that means a lot to me. I have a lot of respect and admiration for you, and maybe we can be absolutely united on an independent campaign for Keanu Reeves. We pick
done.
I don't know what his home state. He used to live in my building, so he could run for governor, and he would definitely beat Kathy Hochul and Lee Zeldin. Yeah. That's the kind of independent. You want to talk about independent candidates? Just let somebody poll that and see if Keanu Reeves ran against Kathy Hochul and Lee Zeldin. I said this to Sarah Jessica Parker when she was on our show. If she ran for mayor, she'd crush people. Like there's a lot of folks out there that people might scoff at. They did that to Ronald Reagan. They did that to Torah. They did that to a lot of other folks. And anyway, Keanu for governor, and maybe we'll see.
Done.
Thank you, my friend, for all you do.
Thank you.
Stay vigilant, sir.
All righty.
Thank you.
You got it.
All right. I know that was a little bit longer.